Let's get started with the TED Talk. So our first TED Talk speaker to join us is going to be Lilian Corral, Director of National Strategy for John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Now, she manages a national portfolio that focuses on the development of Foundation's smart city strategy. She came to Knight from the city of Los Angeles, where she served as the Chief Data Officer for the mayor, where she operationalized the mayor's directive on open data beyond the lens of transparency and towards the vision of data-driven Los Angeles through management of the city's open data program. Now, she's got a number of key accomplishments: development of the GeoHub, first of its kind, data management solution for integrating geospatial information across the city of Los Angeles' 41 departments. Now, she joined, prior to joining the mayor, she spent 15 years in a wide range of health and human services issues as an advocate and executive leader. Now, she holds a master's degree in public policy from UCLA and is a native of Colombia. So please welcome Lilian Corral.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I did miss yesterday's "Where are you from?" So I'm glad you mentioned it. So another Colombiana in the room. I'm really excited to be able to share my story of how I got to GovTech. It's very different than many of the stories that you've all experienced, in that I don't come from a computer science or an engineering background. I actually came into technology from a systems change perspective, having spent, as Jesse mentioned, about at least 10 years of my career working to try and transform systems through advocacy and policy. And so what was really interesting was sort of stumbling into technology in the late, after 2008 and in the early 2010s, thinking through about how government and nonprofits really use technology and data to re-engineer the way they do business. So I always talk about the fact that my story is as much a story about taking leaps as it is about sort of achievement and accomplishments like all of us. The big leap that I think I'll forever kind of hold dear to me was about 3 years ago, actually. Before 3 years ago, I took the leap. I left my job, and I said, I really want to work in transforming government, and where am I going to go do that? And I didn't know, so I'd saved up enough money. I'm the oldest daughter of a very traditional Latina household with a single mom, so there's no safety net cushion except for what I had saved up. And I really explored this was my opportunity to really go find that passion. I had already been working in technology, and I'll tell you more about that. But that leap and that chance to go out there and not just kind of make a move professionally, but really, really find the thing that motivated me is actually what landed me as the Chief Data Officer in the city of Los Angeles. And so that's why I say my story, as I'll share more about it, is as much about taking the risk as it is about sort of kind of finding that career path up the corporate ladder. And so when I took the leap, I came into the office of Mayor Garcetti, now actually having had a lot of experience doing systems change reform within a network of nonprofits. Prior to that, and the real kind of dive into technology came when I started to work with this network, this very unwieldy network of nonprofits in California. I was brought in 2010 to lead what is called 211 California, which is a network of health and human services agencies that work with counties to connect the lowest income, most vulnerable Californians to social services. And there I was, and I was supposed to advocate, I was supposed to fundraise and connect them politically. And what I found was 33 organizations, very decentralized, with really, really bad technology, which at the time, I was familiar with, but was not as familiar with as I became to, and really unwilling to kind of make that digital change, really unclear about how the iPhone had transformed their own way of doing service beyond the fact that they didn't even recognize it. So it was my job to say, actually, you know what? It's not about a political or an organizational development strategy that we need. It's actually, we need a digital strategy. We need a technology strategy. And so there came I in 2010 with my idea. I always tell the story about my APIs. And I said, guys, we're going to have to get some APIs, and we're going to have to transfer data amongst ourselves, and we're going to have to share data with our counties, and we're going to have to build applications on these phones that even the poorest of the poor have, because they have them and they're using them. So why aren't we using them to better connect them to services? And guess what? They're not going to call us probably. This idea that we wait for them to call us is really not going to work. They're probably going to text us, and we're probably going to have to be proactive about it. So there I was with my APIs, and I was essentially like the devil. I was like, how could you, what are these APIs? And you're going to take our data, and people are going to steal it, and this is our worth, and you're going to destroy our organization. Clearly that did not happen, and the world and the APIs are still, we're all still here, and it's developing. But that was a really informative experience for me, because it's then what led me to understand how critical it was from a policy perspective and a systems change perspective to see something like technology changing the way that we were working, and then actually transform my own professional career away from that advocacy angle into one that actually started executing solutions across 33 organizations, something I didn't imagine. So then I got to Mayor Garcetti's office. Now I had all this experience. I knew how to procure software. I knew how to move systems onto phone systems, PBXs onto VoIP systems. I knew how to develop applications. I learned to code. I knew what civic tech was, and I was just really excited and passionate about where to go. And then there was this mayor who was really excited about how do we use technology for innovation in government as well, and he was espousing this idea of open data. So I got into the office. I had already quit my job. I almost started really as a volunteer, and then I became the full-fledged chief data officer for the city. And it started with this idea of open data, which is something that a lot of city officials and government officials are really working on. And we really use that open data. So putting on my systems thinking hat from before, we really use that open data program to actually completely turn around the idea that data is not just about transparency in this political perspective, but really data is, again, about digitally transforming the way government works. And so we started to use that open data portal to publish data sets. We publish now in the city. When I left, we had over 1,100 public data sets that you may or may not be aware of, actually are used all the time by private partners, by Uber, by Waze, et cetera. We published those 1,100 data sets, and we actually started to publish them not just focused on the public, but really for city officials. We started to see our own city staff use our open data portal as a way to connect, to find information that had been siloed in those 41 departments. And then we started to build platforms that actually allowed them to share the data, to not go into our portal to find that data, but actually to share the data from their own systems. And that's where the GeoHub came as an idea of most of the city's data is actually locked in geospatial systems. How do we connect those systems together, allow them to share privately, publicly, and then guess what? To actually build applications in an agile way on top of those platforms. So in what I call 3 political dog years, we were able to build a network. We were able to push this open data program to life. We were able to publish 1,100 data sets. We were able to basically leave behind a culture that is not forever changed, but it's definitely on its way to being more data-driven. The fact that I feel comfortable in the fact that regardless of whether or not I'm there, like data's a fact, they all know it, it's not going away, and we've at least given them a little bit of like that first taste of it to be able to actually start moving forward. And so now, some of the stuff we've done, so now I'm taking sort of my next big leap, which is the curiosity for me has always been driven by like systems change, right? I was a kid who benefited a lot from the system, and so I wanted to make sure that everybody could do that and we could improve it and be efficient. So now the question is, if it can happen in this unwieldy nonprofit network afraid of APIs, if I can do some change in the city of Los Angeles, what does that change look like in cities across America? Cities that aren't like Los Angeles, cities like Macon, Georgia, Akron, Ohio, Detroit. And so now I've taken my next big leap, which is the Director of National Strategy for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Their goal is to develop a more informed and engaged society. And so the question now becomes, if we develop a smart city strategy, what are the investments, infrastructure, and data in cities that diverse needed that a foundation could actually put into the fold with partners, private and public, to be able to ignite that informed and engaged society? We now know that data and technology impact not just the way we live and move around cities, but maybe even the way we vote. So how do we actually start to be more community-centered, more citizen-driven in the way we design technology, and not just consumer-focused? And so now this next big leap is going to take me into hopefully building and supporting and facilitating others to build smart cities across America. And it's just the beginning, and I'm sure there's going to be more leaps to come. So this is just a little bit of my story.
Sorry, sometimes I forget that too. So, but it's been a massive project that he's been involved in. It's a multiple deployment scenario here, and he's just been, I can tell you, at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, an inclusive leader who always answers the bell no matter what we need from a diversity perspective. I'm thrilled to introduce our good friend, Adam Vasquez. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. I've been very fortunate in this program, this FAST program, Future Architecture for Software Transformation. It's really taking all the buzzwords, a lot of the buzzwords you hear about, cloud, software as a service, all this for one of the world's largest software companies. And I was the IT leader for that. So it's very exciting. But let me tell you about how I got to where I got a little bit. The road to the Silicon Valley. I was born in Mexico, in a really small town in Mexico. Some roads were paved, some roads were not paved. It was a farming town, and so never would I figured that I would be in IT or high tech. I didn't even know what that was. But then I was raised in the small town of Manteca. Again, if you look at this picture here, not a lot of high tech, right? Not a lot. So I tried to get a picture that showed a dairies. There was a lot of dairies, a lot of farming. And I grew up actually working on the farms and working in this type of environment. But one of the things that I learned working in that is that you wake up early, you work hard, you go to school sometimes, and then you work after school too. That's the kind of environment that my parents brought me up in. And it was probably in 7th grade where I realized that I was a real nerd. And the reason I realized that is we had this math science test, and I got the best score of the entire school. And my parents are super proud, but I was the guy trying to cover it up. I didn't want anybody to know that I was a nerd. So I became a closet nerd, and it was, I wanted to be known for sports, et cetera. But in the end, it's really what's really drove my career. My junior year, I met with my counselor, who proudly had not looked at my folder, had not looked at what courses I had taken, etc. But he proudly recommended that I go to trade school and become a carpenter or a plumber or electrician. And it was at this pivotal time that I got a lot of help. It was my math teacher that got extremely upset with my counselor, so upset that he connected with my science teacher and my English teacher, and they got me a new counselor. And the new counselor that I met with basically looked at my transcripts, looked at what I had done, And I asked her, do you think I can get into college? And she says, wow, you can get into anything you want. So I felt really, really proud, and it was really exciting to hear that. And long story short, I graduated with a computer science degree. I went through a path for some of you young folks that don't know what you're doing. I started off as a civil engineer, and then I realized, wow, there's not a lot of jobs right now in civil engineering, so I started doing electrical engineering. And it wasn't until my junior year where they made me write software, the electrical engineering field had me write software, that I realized, wow, I have more passion for writing software than I do the chip design and designing circuits, et cetera. So I became a computer scientist, and I graduated computer science. And then, as luck would have it, in 1985, I graduated during a Silicon Valley recession in HITEC. So it was, so I was looking for jobs, and a lot of people were downsizing. A lot of companies were downsizing, shrinking during that period. And I ran into a person named Armando Nunes, who he's Hispanic, and he took a chance. He hired me, and he sold me to the company. Robertson Home is I hired a kid programmer who can help us fix some of the things that we have. And he not only hired me and gave me my start, but he also introduced me to the CFO, the president, et cetera, at that company, that set me up to, when I moved to Lockheed. And the reason I moved to Lockheed, I love Robertson Homes, but my girlfriend, now my wife for 30 plus years, moved to the Silicon Valley, and I kind of followed, and I joined her at Lockheed. At Lockheed, I was very fortunate again. I worked for my first level supervisor, who, her name was Lily O'Byrne. Don't let the last name fool you. Her last name came from a marriage, but she rose through the ranks and became the CIO. And as she rode that, I kind of went with her, kind of thing. So she was helping me along the way. I left Lockheed and I joined AMD. And again, I wasn't looking to get into a leadership role. I was just looking to do the right job, the best job that I could do. And it was my director that offered me, goes, you should try getting into management and leadership position. We think you're going to do a spectacular job. And to be quite honest, I was kind of afraid to do it. And I rejected the offer. And then she was a really smart lady. She got together with the vice president, and they had a conversation with me, and they put a package together to where I could try to become a manager. And the deal was I could do it for 6 months. If I didn't like it, I could go back and be my nerdy, where I felt at home, being a nerd in programming and doing creating databases, et cetera. But that was over 20 years ago. Then I joined Hewlett Packard when it was a combined company. In 2007, when I joined Hewlett Packard, I joined as an executive, so I was already a director. But Hewlett Packard had over 300,000 employees, and you kind of get lost in the crowd. You're doing great things, and I was transforming the environments in the organization, but I was really kind of hidden. Nobody knew who I was. And then, as luck would have it, the company hired this CIO, a new global CIO, by the name of Ramon Baez. And excuse me, he changed my life. He took a risk and got me in charge of this huge problem that he had. And because he took that risk, I had visibility and I had connections to where I had to work with the CTO, the CFO, and got all these people. And because of that, it kind of expanded my career. It got my visibility. Instead of it being in this 300,000 company and being in a little box where I was doing great things, nobody had visibility to him. He took me from that, took a risk on me, put me in that role. And then I had visibility. I was connected to our CTO. I was connected to the CFO. I'd prepare presentations that he had to do for our CEO, Meg Whitman. And when I think back at that, he took a big risk in having me do that role. But then again, he was also there to coach me along the way. When I had issues or problems, he was coaching me along the way. So it's because of people that I've talked about You know, my math teacher, my coaches, my director, Ramon Baez, is why I have so much passion about giving back to others. And because I know we have the skills to do it, we just need the opportunities to be able to do that. And I spend time, I coach my team, I coach people in lessons that I learned, and I didn't create it myself. Antonio Neri, our president, he sponsored a training program for executives. Very few executives at Hewlett Packard and Hewlett Packard Enterprise had attended this training. It was provided by Harvard, and it was Antonio Neri again, another Hispanic that you see in the HITEC that actually selected the people that were going to be part of this program, and I was selected. So I benefited a lot from learning from the best, and I do mean the best. The person that taught me a lot about strategy was the guy that wrote the book that a lot of companies use, and it's out in the industry. Michael Porter kind of did some of those lessons for me. So I've been pretty fortunate about receiving a lot of benefits. It doesn't mean that I work hard. I wake up early. I work hard. I work long days. But I was doing that before I met Ramon, right? So it's always looking out for opportunities that you might get and aligning with people that can help you achieve great things that I'm very proud of. So there's no way that I could do this without the help of others. And I couldn't be in the position that I'm in without the support. This last slide I'll just cover it real quick. I can work long hours because I have a lot of passion for what I do. I really love what I do. I have a lot of passion. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy interacting with people. I live with integrity. It's kind of how I was raised, as a boy. I respect and empower others. I don't try to control others. I really try to get people that think different than myself and collect their ideas and create a better idea than I could do myself. I'm accountable. If something goes wrong within my team, I've never blamed my team. It's my problem. So, and then I enable others to be successful. I try to coach and mentor to enable others to be successful and allow them to do so. With that, next. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So now you know why I was encouraged to meet this guy. I mean, if you ever wonder if the push-up and pull-up mentality works, I mean, he's a prime example, and obviously Ramon lived that through HITEC, and his legacy certainly extends beyond not just at HPE, but here at HITEC as well. So thank you for that story. It was very, very, very emotional. I know you almost got me crying. So for our next panelist, I'd like to introduce Pilar Manchon, Director of Cognitive Interfaces at Amazon. Now, she's been an active contributor in the world of AI for over 22 years, and her background combines arts and sciences, academy and industry, engineering and business, strategy and execution, startup, and corporate executive management. Now, after her experience at SRA International as an international scholar and at NetBytel as a senior computational linguistic and technology architect, she returned to the University of Seville in Spain as a researcher to participate in a number of European frame program projects. In 2005, Pilar co-founded Indices, a spin-off of the University of Seville that developed intelligent conversational agents. Now, as CEO, Pilar and her team drove the company through a very challenging time during the global financial crisis into international growth and actually in a successful exit. The company was acquired by Intel in 2013, and their technology became the core foundation of Intel's digital assistance platform. So she joined the leadership team there at Intel here in Santa Clara and has held a number of different positions with responsibility at Intel, initially managing her team and then growing into a larger role of wearables, microprocessors, ambient computing, IoT, and leading a number of cognitive computing initiatives So please welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. I did not expect them to read the whole introduction, so sorry about that. I know there was quite a mouthful. Most people ask me, computational what? What are you? So I'm a linguist. Despite the fact that you heard a lot about artificial intelligence, cognitive science, and IoT, microprocessors, so my career has been a little different, to say the least. But I didn't come here to talk about me today. I wanted to talk a little bit about life, society, AI, how things are going to change, and what our responsibility as leaders will be in that world that's coming. And babies, too, because I'm a woman and I'm supposed to talk about babies. No, just kidding. No, but there is a story that we all believe, we're all brought up into when we're born, right? We come to the world naked. As little babies, we grow, we learn to interact with the environment. Our parents, our friends, our relatives are there helping us along the way. And then we train. We train for the life that's ahead of us to be worthy members of society, contributors, right? And then we hope that we train enough so that when the time comes, we're ready for the competition. Because that's what life is about. It's a competition. It's about growing. It's about being part of it. And then we hope that at some point victory comes and we achieve our goals and we are everything that we ever meant to be, or not. Turns out that race that we have ahead of us looks a little more like this. It's like, or maybe like that. You get into puddles, you get into situations that are not exactly what you were expecting, that were not really what anybody told you. I mean, you were expecting to be competing in a clean world with all the tools that you were given and using them in the way that they were meant to be used. Yeah, well, sometimes you don't even make it to the end because something happens. And sometimes it's because somebody trips you. Sometimes it's because you trip by yourself. Sometimes it's just something happens and, life happens and you just don't make it, right? And in the end, it's not just about winning. It's about just making it to whatever it is you were meant to be and being happy with who you are and being satisfied with that journey that you are taking, right? And this is pretty much what our lives are like. We're born, we grow, we train, and then at some point in life we become professionals. Sometimes not the professionals that we thought we were going to be. I was meant to be an air hostess when I was younger. That's what my advisor told me when I was in school. And that's the ecosystem that we live in, right? But what happens when a new species comes into the ecosystem? What's the new species that we have in our ecosystem? Well, I do work in the world of AI, so for me it's unavoidable to talk about artificial intelligence and robotics and how it's going to shape society and how the world is going to change and what the perception of that is today. And I am from Seville in the south of Spain, very well known for HITEC, nanotech, and all that, right? Rather more for flamenco, oranges, wine, life, party, yeah? So when I go back home, and I go back home often, at least twice a year, to spend time with the family, and I talk about what I do, at least what I can talk about, people look at me funny. It's like, you're going to be responsible for my children not to have a job tomorrow. I go, shoot. No, that's not what I meant. We are automating a lot of things, but we're meaning to do is not to leave everybody out of a job, right? It's like to make life better, to make better things for our children. And, we're working hard on that. But then there is this conception of what AI is going to be like, what robotics is going to be like. And when you see, things like the movies and all that, people do start believing in all those things. So if you think about what AI and robotics are going to play a role at, then you might think that in the food chain, they might be, below us, right? We control AI, so we're still good, right? That's a good position to be in. What if they're equals to us? Some people are starting to talk about the rights. There's one robot that just got citizenship in Saudi Arabia. Okay, well, talk about immigration. It's like, okay, right? And what about if, they're above us and they happen to be superior to us and they take control of the world, like some movies will show you, right? So this is what comes to mind. You think about Terminator, you think about all this, terrific or horrible AI that might just take over the world and the Matrix and that kind of thing, right? So we don't really know, are robots going to be at our service? Are they going to be helping us in doing things that we don't really have the time or the desire to do? Are they going to be doing something else? Well, we do know for a fact. I saw some eyes over there. Well, we know for a fact that there are going to be armies of these things out there doing a lot of things. And if you see the numbers, for someone who's not fully understanding what this is all about, it might be even scary. And I'm not talking about, the new generations coming, and not necessarily all the people here in the Silicon Valley, because we are, we're in the place to be for technology, right? We get all the information first. We're working in large corporations. The disruptions happen here. There's breakthroughs all the time. So we are pretty much very well informed that in the rest of the world, even though the information gets through, it becomes a little more scary, if you will, right? So a lot of the talks that I do and a lot of the requests that I have are around what do we study? What do we prepare? How do we prepare for the future when, most of the jobs that when I graduate are going to be out there don't even exist maybe. So I don't really know how to get prepared for that, right? And if you see these numbers, it becomes even more scary, right? 5% of the jobs are fully automatable. Okay, there go drivers and truck drivers and a bunch of other things. But even jobs that are less traditional, like lawyers and doctors and all that, will be partially automated with the growth of AI and all that, right? So we just look at these numbers, people get really, really scared. How many of you think that this is somewhere similar to the future that's coming to us? Please raise hands. And there are a few of you, very naive few of you. Do you imagine robots moving around with the limitations that we have? Humanoids typing? What would they type? But it's an irrational thought that comes to us many times because we think of these entities almost like humans, like superior humans, and then we imagine the world with a super kind of man or superhuman kind of thing there that is going to be superior to us in every single way. And it's going to be doing things just better, in a similar way, but just better, right? And so we envision the world as a competition, when in reality, we really need to think about what this means to us. In terms of the internet, if you look back at the numbers, for every job that was lost to the internet, 2.4 jobs were created. So it's not about the job market going down and disappearing and people not being out of jobs. It's that, like in any industrial revolution, things are going to change. And I think that our job is to prepare people for what's coming in that situation. See that the tools are there to collaborate with us, that we are building the world of tomorrow. We are the makers of that world, and it's up to us to decide what that's going to look like. So it's not a matter of this thing that is growing by itself, that is going to evolve in a direction that we don't know. It is us that is making that world. It's us that are making those decisions. And in order to make those decisions, we need to understand how it works, and we need to spread the word. We need to encourage others to learn more about this world so that they can make conscious decisions, so they can have justified ethical positions about the difficult situations, the difficult decisions that we're going to have to make. So not everybody's going to be right or wrong. But when you talk with people that don't really have the training or the understanding or the background to understand what those decisions are about, then they're easily manipulated, right? And that's something that we as leaders, I think, need to have a say in the matter. It's a matter of taking responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, said Voltaire, very well known as Spider-Man. So I think that what I'm here to say is basically we are in a privileged situation. We have exposure to what's coming. We have positions of power. We have the power to influence others. And then we also have the responsibility to spread the word, make the world a better place, and lead AI and robotics towards making the world a better place. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all four of our TED Talk guests. So one more round of applause for all of them. We have actually one more. Sorry, we've got one more TED Talk actually that we want to give as well. So if I could get Bernard Coleman to join me up here as well. Bernard is the global head of diversity and inclusion at Uber Technologies. In that role, he's driving D&I programs for many of his people program areas that include HR, talent recruitment, analytics, marketing, communications, and branding. Now, prior to joining Uber, Bernard led diversity and human resources initiatives for the Hillary Clinton for America campaign. As the first ever in the U.S. history, Chief Diversity and Human Resources Officer for any presidential campaign for either political party. Now, Bernard previously served also on the Democratic National Committee for 6 years as a Deputy Chief Diversity Officer and Director of HR. Now, he's held many senior level roles with the DNC and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Society of Human Resources Management and the government of the District of Columbia. So, if you could please welcome Bernard to the stage. Thank you.
Let's see, is this working? Can everybody hear me okay? No. Okay. Let's check it. All right. I think I'm empowered. So I'm going to talk to you briefly. So how did I get here? So this is my first TED Talk, X, or my rendition of it. And I want to talk about the power of microinclusion, because how did I get here? And as I was pulling this presentation together, I thought, how did I really get here? So when you think, I'm a diversity inclusion practitioner, and there's a lot of touchy-feely feelings, thoughts, thinking about how we can include other people. But when I go back through my life, I'm just a kid from Virginia. So what did I do to make the leap to working for Hillary Clinton as her first chief diversity and HR officer, and then getting a job at Uber as the global head of diversity and inclusion? And I thought about what were those things that I did. What were the 3 things that I did on a daily basis? And it's these 3 things. There's daily microinclusion. So microinclusions might be a new term that you never heard before, but it's how are the ways that we can include people? Like most people say, like, okay, we know what exclusion feels like. We know what we should be doing, but microinclusions are doing the opposite of what we call microaggressions. Everybody know what microaggressions are? All right, good. For those who don't know, microaggressions are like plausible. They're like daily. I'm going to call them death by 1,000 cuts, right? So like these things that are said to you, done to you, and you're like, wow, where did that come from? Why are you doing that? And it can leave you really charged up. Like you can feel emotionally hijacked. Like what just happened? What did you just say to me? Sometimes it's racial, it's gender, but it feels like little small aggressions, like And so micro-inclusion is the opposite of that. What are the ways that we can be including people so that they feel involved, saying hello in the hallway, giving positive affirmations to people, but bringing people into the process, because that's what diversity inclusion is all about. So every day I try to do micro-inclusions to bring everybody in. So daily micro-inclusions. The second is there's a strength in kindness. My whole life I've been kind to people. You might say, well, that's simple. I know that. Everyone knows to be kind. But I do it every day. I try to be kind to everyone I meet, no matter who I meet. And I thought about it when people, like it's my calling card, when people come back and say, like, what do you remember about me? Like somebody, like my wife went and saw somebody and they said, oh, I remember Bernard from many years ago. He's a gentle giant. I'm like, that's interesting you said that, but they remember my kindness. It's my calling card. And it's easy to do. Just be kind to people. The only time I could say I'm not is maybe when I'm road raging. So keeping that in mind, there is a strength in kindness. And then there's the power of consistency. The one thing I am is consistent. I do the same thing every day. I eat the same foods. I do all the same things over and over and over again. You probably heard the saying, sure and steady wins the race. You do. When somebody else is speeding along, I'm steadily beating you. Just because I'm consistent in all the things that I do. So I'm consistently practicing these micro inclusions, which make people remember, man, he's really nice. He included me. Um, then just being consistent, like if you consistently do anything, you think about any great person who did anything great, like Michael Jordan, my favorite basketball player. Um, the reason he was so great is because he put the time in. He did it over and over and over again through repetition. That's a big part of success. Because I often think, like, there's this joke I thought about. I was talking to my dad, and often in diversity and inclusion, people will say, like, you know, I know what to do, or like, you're telling me all these things I already know what to do, but what can I do instead? So I think about going to the doctor. You go to the doctor, say, Doc, what can I do to get healthy? Stop smoking, eat better, exercise, get more rest. Yeah, I know all that, but what can I do instead? And it's like, I just told you, you have to be consistent and you have to stick with it. Like anything you want in life, you have to work at it. And that's the power of consistency. So when I think about it, what I just said it's all very simple, but it's not easy. You have to stick with the plan. You have to include people over and over again. Over include, because they will then extend you that grace and also include you too. You have to be kind. We're working it's a very divisive society that we're in. We can extend the grace to others by being kind to one another. It goes a long way. And again, these are things you might say, like, Bernard, we know all that, but people don't do it. So I just want to remind people, like, that's what I've done, like, my entire career. People always remember, he's a nice guy. You also have to be competent and good. But if you're a nice person, like I can think about people who are jerks, I'm not going to go to bat for them. I don't want to work with them. But someone who's kind, who is also competent and a hard worker, I will work with them. I will go to bat for them, and I will move heaven and earth to try to help that person. You will pay it forward. They'll pay it forward to you, and you can pay it forward to others. And then I said there's strength and consistency, or there's power and consistency. Like just being consistent, no matter where I go, I show up the same. I'm always the same Bernard wherever I go. I'm never like, and he's two-faced. Like I saw him at the thing, and he was acting that way. Nope. Who I am is who I am all the time. Because otherwise, if you're faking the funk or not being authentic, it's hard keeping up all your identities I'm this guy. Like, no, I'd just rather be me all the time. It's a lot simpler. I don't have to use all that cognitive energy faking who I am. So it is simple, but it's not easy. You just have to be consistent. And then also there's two other things on that slide that I didn't say. There is also the gift of timing. I have had good timing. I've stepped into places at the right time. And also there's my faith. Like God looks out for me. I know it. But it's timing. There's other three things I said, and my faith. I just always believe, just keep pushing forward. So I'm doing mine in 5 minutes so that we can do 5 minutes for Q&A because a lot of times people like to ask questions, and I want it to be dynamic. But I would say a call to action that I would ask you all to do is commit to creating daily micro-inclusions for others. Like, what can you do to bring other people in? Think about the time you were excluded. Do the opposite of that. Bring somebody else in. Pay it forward. People are modeling and mirroring what you're doing. Like, I see what you're doing, and they will model good behaviors just like people model bad behaviors. So I would encourage you all to do a micro-inclusion every day. If anything else I said today, extend the grace to others. And then I want to leave you with this quote before we get to the questions, but this is by Dr. Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's really powerful because I can think about any day that I had, and when it's one of those great feeling days, like it's a glorious memory. When you meet people like that, they have a positive impact for your life for days in. Even bad people, you still remember that terrible feeling, but you remember those good feelings. But that's my spiel. Questions? The gentleman got the mic. He's going to bring it to y'all. I'm going to grab some water.
Hi, I'm Kathy. Nice to meet you. Thank
Nice
you
to
for
meet you
being
as well.
here. My question is, how do you make kindness part of the culture in an industry that is so cutthroat?
That's a great question. So what we're doing at Uber, it's your value system or your norms. And when you hire for inclusion. So you say, we're checking, you're going against a job description. Can you code at this and can you do that? Also, what's your take on inclusion? So like I'm telling you at Jump Street, this is important to us, and you have to have a good answer to get the job. But it's also from a candidate experience. If I'm getting employed, I'm like, wow, they care about inclusion. They actually asked me about it. And then also, like the most important thing is for the systems. In any organization, you have checks and balances. So the individual actions, what I'm talking about with micro inclusions, but the other part is systems, like the reinforcement agency to make sure that we're all consistently doing the right thing. Because otherwise, I can do all the right things all the time, but if the systems don't reinforce it, then it falls apart. So it's a multi-pronged strategy, because what we do at Uber is we focus on our individuals, we focus on systems just to make sure they're fair and more equitable. We focus on leadership, and then we focus on citizenship. And what we call citizenship is like, what good are you doing in the community? Because like people want to feel good about the work they do. They want to feel fulfilled. If it is our belief, if we do all four of those things at the same time in tandem, like it's a tops up, bottom up push, where everyone's kind of pulling together, and it's the pull of power, positive pressure. So that's how you do it. It's easier to do it if you start from the beginning. Like for organizations that are bigger, you're retrofitting, so you're behind the ball, but you can still catch up. Yes. Questions. Love questions.
Hi. Oh, it didn't go. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
My name's Gina Miranda. I'm with Oracle Corporation, and you were talking about microaggressions versus micro-inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of micro-inclusions, but I know what microaggressions are. And I try very hard not to do those. But my question is, if you're at neither of those two extremes, you're somewhere in the middle, right? You try not to insult people on a day-to-day basis. We're involved with corporate ERGs and try to be inclusive, but I think a lot of times we find ourselves in that middle place of, well, we're not rude, but we don't really go to the micro inclusion place because we're just not being thoughtful about it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you talk to somebody who's in the middle, busy every day? I'm too busy to be micro inclusive.
Right. I mean, that's a fair point. People might say they're too busy, but a lot of times people want to know what's in it for me. So you want to remember, what could I be doing to make your life better? And think of it's deeply immersive when you do diversity inclusion work. You want to make people realize that what's in it for me. Otherwise, people don't see like, well, what's the point? I don't see, I get it. It's important, but I don't really care. They don't go all the way there with you. I think what I always try to focus on is what's in it for me. And then the second part is, well, why not? Why wouldn't you want to include people here? Why are you too busy to bring other people into the fold? Why would you do that? And kind of flip the question on them, like, so that is if it's a question, but I would say, like, why don't you want to include other people? Or why is this not important enough to you? Why is it, I definitely love your input. Why shouldn't you want mine? And I flip the question on them to make them take the mirror and look at themselves. Because it is, why wouldn't I want to? I would argue that it is. Like when I was in high school, I would always get everywhere early. I'm like, man, I'm waiting on everybody. I'd always be waiting. So I started becoming like either right on time or late. Patterns are real. So if people consistently do it, it's just that you lack the will, I would say. Like I'm just doing enough. I would encourage that person to care. Like you're just not caring enough. Because that's why diversity inclusion often doesn't work, because honestly, you aren't putting the effort in. And so I would try to push that person to like actually giving the effort, because they're just doing enough. So it's like being an ally. You actually have to help be an ally to one another for they then give you the grace to also be an ally. So I always say, like, can you do a little more? Because a lot of times people just need a boost. What can I do to be more inclusive? And you just got to give them a list of things to do. I,
Hi, Rosa Ramos Kwok, Bank of America. So we've all heard, and you're coming at a great time at Uber, and I'm sure there's a lot of cultural change going on because we all read the paper. So how do you measure progress culturally? So what is your strategy around, because all of us are here, we care about diversity and inclusion, we care about making sure that we're pushing up and pulling up, And those microaggressions do impact, and they're hard to measure. They're part of culture. How do you plan on changing the culture and measuring that change for the positive?
So there's a short term, thank you for your question. There's a short term and long term answer. So the short term, I think it's doubling down on inclusion because people want to feel included. Like, so there's this construct that we have. It's the two dimensions of belonging or the two dimensions of inclusion. So partly I want to belong, and then I also want to be valued for my authenticity and have room for authenticity. So like because everybody wants to go to the tribe. Like it makes me feel comfortable. I feel I'm good. My people are here. I'm here. I feel comfortable. But then I'm me. So we have a metric. We have cultural surveys with a lot of data tied back to it, but it's measuring for belonging. Belonging is directly attributed to attrition. So if you know, like, there's a high sense of belonging, we know folks will stay. If the belonging metric is low, then they're leaving. So that's how you know whether you're doing well or not. And I think inclusion is something that everybody can, and I'm sorry, I'm giving all the love to this side of the room. I know that inclusion is really important. People want to feel included. Like, fundamentally, I don't think anyone ever wants to not feel included. So that's the number one measure. But then there's other things that we can do to measure. We have this YD&I Matters training or workshop. We don't call it training because people don't want to be told what to do. So workshops are more well received. And we've trained about 5,000 people in person since April. But the thing of what makes that great is it's a little bit of the implicit association test, which talks about what your biases are, but we don't go so deep in unconscious bias because that's been shown not to work. But we kind of unpack things and help people understand what they're doing. And we ask, what actions are you doing afterwards? And did that training impact you? And then it's about reinforcement. So did you take on more inclusive actions post this training? Yes. And I think so far 90% of our staff have said yes, of the 5,000 we've trained. But then you keep measuring for that and then reinforcing it. Because also, again, it has to be about reinforcement. Otherwise, we forget. Like with any training, like if you told me to go do geometry, it wouldn't go well. But if you reinforced it and got me some practice going, I'll be back. Looks like I got 3 minutes. Okay. Oh, love questions.
Hi, Cindy Healy with Microsoft. Love your personal philosophy. And I'm just wondering, as a woman, I've struggled a little bit with being overly nice, and that kindness can be mistaken for weakness. And so I just wondered if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, same here. I think by being so nice, people do think you're weak. I know I get it all the time, but I'm consistent. I will kill you with kindness. I won't stop. Um, you just can't, because like one thing my father always tells me: don't change how you play your game. Otherwise, we co-opt the culture that we don't like, and we become part of the problem as opposed to the solution. And then people are watching you, and like people are looking to you as a leader and saying, because notice when things happen, one person does it, then others get courage. It's always that one person does it, and they're like, wow, what you were doing today, I saw it. I'm going to do it too. And it works in the opposite way too. So what I always try to do is like, I'm not going to change how I operate. This works. This works. Be consistent, and then eventually people will follow. But if you go with the herd, then we're only compounding the problem. But I would say keep it up.
Thanks for your presentation. It's inspiring. I'm curious, you were the Chief Inclusion Officer for the campaign for Mrs. Hillary Clinton. Did you get to know the Chief Inclusion Officer for the Republican Party? Did you talk about inclusion?
For the party?
For the other party?
No, they one. So it was indicated that I was the first ever, and for any political party. So I was first chief diversity because it wasn't a thing before. Obama had a pretty diverse campaign himself, so we probably didn't think you needed the need. But for our campaign, we thought, what are we going to do? What are we doing the next levels? And as I understand it, Donald Trump didn't have one.
I'm probably don't, but
I'm pretty confident he didn't. I'm sure I would have met that person, but I would have talked with him because the one thing the election did teach me is it's important to understand how the other side feels. Fundamentally, if I don't understand where you're coming from, how can we get to solutions? Because if otherwise we're at an impasse, like I'm not going to talk with you, you're not going to talk with me. So what productive conversation can occur from that? Particularly in diversity and inclusion, where people just don't get it. Everyone's in a different spot in their journey, and they all want to like, I know all this, or like, I don't know why, or I want to do something. Like everyone's at a different spot, and you have to help them in that progression. So if you start with, you're this, the conversation's over.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bernard, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, so now let's thank all four.